I made a video yesterday speaking about the idea of being distracted with the misconceptions about Islam and how that can actually distract from the deeper meanings that this faith is bringing to humanity. And one of the things that I said is that it can be distracting to Muslims, people who adhere to the faith of Islam, from learning more about their faith, as well as it could be distracting to non Muslims who are just merely looking to understand Islam as well as connect with the Muslim community. And when people focus on the misconceptions and they try to answer them one after the other, they end up just wasting their time in something that is non ending, because in every time and age, some new misconception will be brought up by someone. And most people who don't know about the faith, or who are not, or who have not spent enough time learning about it, will basically focus on that misconception instead of learning the essence of the faith. And today, what I wanted to talk about is something that can bring the meaning, the deeper meanings of the faith, that was said in an incident that I know it can be triggering to some people, especially when we look at historical events. And that is not my intention. My intention is not to trigger people. My intention is not to create conflict, but it is a way to kind of arrive at deeper meanings that the faith of Islam is trying to communicate. And this event actually happened when the Muslim army, with the met with the Persian Empire at a very famous battle. That battle is called Al-Qadisiah. Now, what happened is that the Muslims were pushing on the Persian Empire. The Muslim army started to push on the Persian Empire, but they never met in a very decisive battle. It was more of smaller battles, smaller winnings here and there. And that started after basically the death of the Prophet, peace be upon him, when both the Roman Empire and the Persian Empire started to support the internal revolutions that were happening in the Islamic Empire after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, many of the tribes that newly joined the Islamic faith started to wanting to gain some political grounds after the absence of the leader, Muhammad, peace be upon him. And that was a very dangerous move because the Muslims were really busy in the death of the Prophet, Muhammad, peace be upon him. They elected the next leader, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, may Allah be pleased with him. And they were busy kind of continuing the work in this newly founded nation, relatively newly founded nation. I mean, by that time, the age of that nation was still, very young. Like, you're talking about something like 25 years or less. It wasn't any more than that. And that nation gained quite a bit of ground, especially after all the tribes decided to accept Islam after the Muslims went back and got Mecca. Mecca is the holiest site for Muslims, and it is located currently in Western Saudi Arabia, which back then was known as the Arabian Peninsula. And in the tradition of the Arabian Peninsula, whoever controls the holy site, Mecca, is basically the true message, or the people that are carrying the true message, because they know that since the time of Abraham, peace be upon him, and Ishmael, peace be upon him, God has protected that holy site. So whoever ends up getting control of that site means that they are on the truth. So when the Arabs saw that, and they saw that the Muslims got the ruling of they ruled over Mecca, they said, okay, well, Islam is the truth, so let's accept Islam as the way of life, or the lifestyle that we will live by. But after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, many of the political leaders, they noticed that claiming prophethood is actually a profitable business. Now, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was doing this with the help of the divine. Those other false prophets that came after, claiming that they were sent by the divine, obviously they didn't last. because they didn't have that divine support. But they wanted to try, because just being a leader of a major tribe, yes, it is profitable and it is politically something that someone can live by for the rest of his life. But being a prophet, it has a longer lasting legacy. Now, what happened after the death of the Prophet, peace be upon him, many of those false prophets started to come up, and many tribes started to wanting to basically eliminate Medina. Medina is the second holy site in Islam, and that's where the caliphate, the ruling headquarter was. That was the capital of the Muslim empire back then. So they wanted to really just destroy Medina. And the Persian and the Roman Empire started to support these revolutions. So the Muslims were dealing with a lot at that time, and they did recognize that, the Persian Empire and the Roman Empire, they wanted to end the Muslim presence. And although despite that, the Persian Empire and the Roman Empire never paid attention to the Arabian Peninsula, because it was just a bunch of tribes that were living there, potentially fighting with each other. There were no resources, not a lot of human capital there as well. But when Islam came, it organized that area, as well as created meaningful drive in the people that were living there. So obviously that can be seen as a threat by the Persian Empire and the Roman Empire. And that was the first time that they actually colluded together to attempt to eliminate the Muslims. So the Muslims were not in a very good spot, or nor a good position at that time. But what happened is that Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, may Allah be pleased with him, the first successor of Muhammad, peace be upon him, ended up basically paying attention to dealing with the internal mutiny that was happening. And he settled that. And then after him came Umar ibn al-Khattab, the second caliphate, or the second successor after the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And when Umar ibn al-Khattab came, Abu Bakr gave him basically an advice. He said, look, we need to deal with this threat. Like, we cannot be under the mercy of the Persian Empire and the Roman Empire. Every time there is an issue, they will be funding basically what you can call in today's term terrorists that are trying to eliminate that empire. So Umar al-Khattab, obviously, he was a very visionary man, and he said, okay, the armies that have been prepared, I will support that, and I will send them out. And he sent an army that was prepared to Iraq, and it was meant to continue to push back on the Persian Empire in an attempt to protect the Islamic Empire from it. And by that time, the Persian Empire, as well as the Roman Empire, had many losses. They lost many, many battles to this newly founded nation that nobody expected such power from. And the chief in command of the Persian Empire, the Sasanian Empire of Persia back then, was Rostam. And Rostam wanted to meet with the Muslims in an attempt to see if there's a way to stop this war, and basically not go with it, that he can maintain his rule and doesn't have to face the Muslims in a battle. Now, the leader of the Muslim army back then, what he wanted to do is that he wanted to send a big delegation, basically to quote unquote show the power of the Muslims. And the Muslims generally, they never, whenever they won any battle, they did not depend on their numbers. There was always that divine connection, that spiritual connection with the divine, that if a battle was to happen, then we're not winning by numbers. And in every instance in history that they depended on their number or their power, they've actually lost. The moment that there is any bit of arrogance that comes into the hearts of the Muslims due to their numbers or due to their power, historically, it has been noted that they've lost. And whenever they have had that humbleness to the divine, despite the opposing army even sometimes being 10 times more in numbers, the Muslims still have won that battle. So while they were debating that, one man came. His name was Ribi bin Amer. May Allah be pleased with him. He was actually not a leader in the army. He was a general soldier in the army, but in his tribe he was a leader. And he did observe that. He said, look, guys, if we send a big delegation, this will show that we're afraid of this huge, massive Persian army that is, waiting there. And that's what they want. They want us to show that, we're afraid. But what he said is that what I think we should do is that we should send one person. So the Muslims, thought about this. He said, okay, why? He said, when you send one person, that one person does not give that high value to that, army or to that empire, and hence it does not give them that false understanding that the Muslims are actually afraid of meeting in a battle. So, a huge debate broke out between the people that were there. And they're like, okay, well, no, that doesn't make sense. Some said they make sense. Then the head of the Muslim army, he said, okay, well, who do we send? Like, okay, fine, Rabi ibn Amir, who do we send? He said, look, send me. Just nominate me and let me go. I'll deal with it. And he was a very political man. He was somebody who is well grounded in the psyche of people, and he had a deep understanding of the faith, and he was not afraid. He's like, okay, look, we're in a battle, he might die, anybody might die. He's not afraid. So he said, okay, I'll go. So usually when a delegation goes from one king to another, that delegation is well prepared in the way they look, in the way that they carry themselves. This man, he went with basically the clothes that he was wearing for the battle. He did not change his clothes. Whatever he was wearing for battle as a soldier, just a common soldier in the Muslim army, he went to Rostam with. Carrying his sword. He was not wearing very massive armor, just a simple armor. And he went with he had a small horse that his tail was short. Now, if you know anything about the culture of horses, the taller and the more beautiful the tail is, the more weight that person who owns that horse has. So he didn't even change his horse. He just had his horse, that was, very small horse, short tail, and he just went to Rustam. Now, when he entered upon Rostam and he started, approaching the palace, everyone was just staring at this man. Like, how is this man coming to meet the king, or not the king, the chief in command, or whoever, the leader of the Persian army? But Rabi ibn Amr didn't care. Like, his presence there is not to show off the Muslim strength or anything. He just wanted to go deliver a message, see what Rostam wanted, because Rostam wanted to meet one of the Muslims. So he went in there, and it's a long story of how he entered to kind of show that he really doesn't give much care to the materialistic stuff that the Persian Empire had, nor what Rostam had. So it is said that he was walking and he had his stick with him, and he was just like, as he was walking, he was basically piercing the carpet that some say it was about 165 or 285-meter long, and by the time he got to Rustam, he just sat on the ground. The people around Rustam, they didn't know what to do with him before he sat down. Like, where do we seat this guy? And he just sat on the ground. So Rustam told him, like, why do you sit on the ground? He said, like, I am not looking to sit in any fancy places. We really don't care about this materialistic aspect of the empire. So Rustam told him, okay, well, we would like to have some sort of treaty between us. We would like to create some sort of a peace treaty and just hold back. So he asked him, why did you even come here? Like, why did you leave your homes in the Arabian Peninsula Basically, he was trying to humiliate him. He said, look, basically, why did you leave your cattle and your camels and your whatever, and you're coming to, attack basically one of the biggest empires in the region or in the history of mankind. And this is where it gets really, really interesting. This is the statement that Ribi bin Amer said to Rustam, is what I meant when I said in my previous video that dealing with misconceptions about Islam simply distracts from the meaning, from the deeper meaning of Islam. So what Rabi ibn Amr told Rustam, he said, جئنا لنخرج العباد من عبادة العباد إلى عبادة رب العباد ومن جور الأديان إلى عدل الإسلام ومن ضيق الدنيا إلى سعة الدنيا والآخرة. Let me translate that. So he said that we have come to remove basically the creation, the slaves, the people from worshipping the created to worshipping the creator. So they wanted to free the people from any sort of slavery, whether that was a physical slavery, like being chained up, being led to the battle with chains, or even like being mentally enslaved by an ideology, by a certain social class. He said that we want to basically free the people from worshipping the created to worshipping the creator. And then he said we wanted also to help people exit from the injustice of the ideologies, the existing ideologies, to the justice of Islam, to the justice of the submission to the one true God, to submission to the divine. Because all the ideologies that have existed and the empires that existed, they know that these ideologies were meant to create that class system and that caste system, and they were meant to create elites and poor people, second class and third class, and people that cannot be redeemed, and all of that. So he's telling him, look, all these ideologies, they are enslaving ideologies, they are oppressive ideologies. So we want to free people from enslaving ideologies by exiting them to a new opportunity. That opportunity is the justice that Islam comes with. And then he told him that we also want to free people from this tightness that they might feel in this life, from this sadness and this basically crushing life that they might be living in, or this crushing feeling that they might be feeling in this life, this hopelessness that they might feel, to the expansive arena of this life and the hereafter. So this life is not the end, and people who are living here in bad conditions, this is not their end. There is a hereafter. So they should not be feeling sad and hopeless in this life. They should be leading this life with an expanded, happy chest, as well as they should be leading it for a higher purpose, which is the hereafter. Now, when you look at such a statement that was given by a regular soldier in the Muslim army to the leader of the Sasanian Empire of Persia, you would understand that any sort of misconceptions that are being created in today's world and age about Islam, about Muslims, are distracting from diving into these deeper meanings. And hence, again, that's why I personally do not like to delve into the misconceptions that are stated, that are out there, because they're all answered. They're all answered by academics. They're all answered by the faith, by the scholars. The answers are out there. But if we're going to base the relationship between us as Muslims, or between the Muslims and the non-Muslims, on this idea that we need to resolve all the misconceptions, we will never get there. So the Muslims that are basing their faith on answering, or they are holding their faith until they answer all these misconceptions, they will waste their life and their time trying to, because there are many of them, and I've spent years looking at them. And it's not like I don't have the answers. I have the answers. I mean, I've already spent years looking into it. But what did it do? Like, did I really benefit much? Was it really correct that, for someone to base their belief and their faith on things that are opposing to that faith, things that are not really logical, things that are not socially acceptable? No. And for people who are non-Muslims, I mean, we see there is a lot of misunderstanding out there that results in hate and bigotry against the Muslims. And those people that live in this arena of hate and misunderstanding, are they really missing out on connecting with the Muslims, who are pretty much right now 25%, like one quarter of the world population? Or are they, really doing something that is useful? So this is something that I wanted to communicate. I hope this video is useful. Go to www.understandislam.ca and subscribe. There will be more materials that will be coming out. And I hope to see you in the next episode. Let me know if you have any questions, and have a good day and a good night.